Hi, everybody. Welcome to Transdimensional Realities, where we talk about everything strange and unusual that happens in the world all around us. I'm your host, Melissa Lee, and this is our fifth episode. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen our other episodes, to go onto my YouTube channel. And you can also listen to the audio podcasts on our network, the Paranormal UK Radio Network, at paukradio.com, as well as it's simulcast on all major streaming platforms. So give us a look. Plus, we have our other shows as well. I'm really excited to talk to my guest today because I've known her for almost 20 years. And she has worked with me on several cases over the years of my paranormal investigations, and we've become very good friends. And I asked her to come on the show to talk about herself, what she does as a psychic medium. So I want to welcome Patti Lehman to the program. Hi, Patti. How are you? Welcome to
Uh,
the show.
how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for coming on. I've been wanting to do an interview with you for a while since we've worked together for so long on many different things,
Yeah,
and just give you a chance to, let people get to know who you are and what you do.
yeah,
So if you could just start off, just tell us a bit about your background.
yeah. So I've been doing this work for close to 30 years now, professionally. And it all started out it was in the 90s. And I was actually going through a depression at the time, going through a lot of stuff, going through a divorce, things like that, which I find a lot of people tend to start looking for their spiritual selves in these times, in the darker times or the shadow times, as we call them. And my aunt, weirdly enough, I never knew was an astrologer. And she had said to me, "Why don't you go to this place in Wayne called The Journey Within?" This woman, Janet Nohavik, God rest her soul, she's was a reverend and blah, blah, blah. So I went to the church and I just, I felt like I finally found a place where I belonged. So I decided to take a class with her, and I took a psychic development class. And she was like impressed with me and said, "Why don't you take the mediumship class?" So I was like, and at the time I was like, okay, so this person's just promoting their stuff. I didn't know her at the time. I didn't realize how ethical she was and everything. And so I did that. I
Mhm.
took the class and did really well. And she right away, she was like, "Will you please you know, join my church with me and, do all this stuff." She was in the very beginning stages of the journey within at the time. And I did. And I was like a very shy person. I really wasn't somebody that would speak in public or whatever. And then I started doing my work there, and I just kind of honed in my skills. I didn't know I was a medium. I didn't realize, honestly, like as a child, I've always had this gift. So, you don't always know like what's happening. I was the only one in my family that had it to that degree.
Right.
People not to that degree. So that's basically how I started my whole business. And I was with the Journey Within for probably 12 years, consistently. And then my business got so busy, and I have my kids, I have my sons. So it was just like so busy that I ended up kind of stepping away from that for a while and just like joining here and there. But yeah, that's basically how I got started.
Now, I've been to the Journey Within. I've been to the church there. When did Janet, when did she pass?
She just passed it was like 2 years ago, I believe.
Okay, because I remember meeting her.
Yeah, an amazing woman. God rest her soul. I mean, what a loss. The church is still going. They're still doing everything, but yeah, she was the heart of it.
Hmm.
And then, that was a pretty interesting thing too, because we had gone through a lot, right? Spirituality and things like this were not all the rage the way that they are now.
Right.
So back then it was like, you were dealing with people calling you all kinds of names and, all that kind of stuff. And we had to fight through the town of Pompton Lakes. They didn't want to give us a space. And, it was crazy. And she would like get very upset. And then she would say, "You know what? It's all going to work out. I need to stay positive and just think about what I want." The universe doesn't always know the difference between what you want and what you fear. So she did that. And she used to always say, "I'm going to have a little," because at that time we had offices in a little basement like by the bakery in Pompton Lakes, and we did the services at the Wise Man bookstore that was there back then. And over time, we went to different places, but she would always say, I see a little chapel, like a little church for myself. And don't you know, like, I don't know how many years into it was, it had to be like at least 10 years into our work, that this woman actually donated the VFW. I think it was a VFW in Pompton Lakes on Carr Street, and gave it to her. She passed away and she donated that to her. So she turned
Wow,
it into a little white chapel that she always wanted. So she manifested her dreams, you know?
that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
I've attended there a few times over the years.
Yeah.
I took a mediumship class there as well. That was a long time ago, but
Yeah.
yeah, it had good energy, really good energy there.
Yeah, they really do. And so, you know, I'm happy to say that I'm one of, you know, very few people that have actually taken those classes, like, you know, and I worked side by side with Janet from the beginning. And the ethics are just what's so important to me, you know, being an ethical reader, being somebody who, you know, cares about your clients, and you're not just popping up on the side of the street like, oh, I'm a psychic, you know, like I did my time and I've learned how to behave with people, how to get my words out, how to approach things, you know. There's
Hmm.
a psychological component to it, you know. So yeah, it's been a really fun journey for me. I love it. And
Awesome.
yeah.
So, well, we met again about 20 years ago when I was doing the beginning of my paranormal research, and we
Mm-hmm.
had a couple of cases that you came on.
Yeah.
The one was where we first really worked with you, and I was impressed with you because you nailed something that nobody knew about. Was that, remember that store in Andover, that tile and stone
I
store?
do. Yeah. I do remember that. Yep.
Yeah, because they were seeing a ghost of a little girl, and they just started calling her Sally. Now I never told you that.
No, you did.
And then when you were walking through, you picked up on you seeing a little girl. You go, I'm getting an S. I think it's like Sally or something. And it's like, bingo.
Yeah, I remember that. I do remember that because I remember at the end they were like, "Oh my God, we call her Sally," you know? So like really funny. Like, and you wonder, like, is her name Sally, like literally, or did she just know that that's what her name was now? You know?
That's a very good question. You never know if people get a ghost or spirit in their house or wherever business,
Yeah,
and they start calling it a name. Are they sensing the spirit's former name,
right.
or does the
And they
spirit just go along with whatever they're calling them?
like, right, it's true. And you know, either way, if you're picking up that energy from the spirit, you know that the spirit is aware of what's happening in the environment. So
Mhm.
it's just such a fun, cool job. I love what I do. So, and you know, I love it because I'm helping people every day. You know, I love that I can give and stories of my own, you know, like I have a story when my dad passed away. I was with him the entire time. I stayed with him in the hospital. I slept there and everything. My dad was very afraid of death. And we would talk to him and say, like, well, what do you want when you die? You know, my mom wanted to be cremated, and he would say, no, I'm not going to die. And we'd be like, well, hypothetically, just say you do someday, you know. And he
Mhm.
wouldn't talk about it. So he was very afraid of death, and he had a lot of experiences. He was in a drug induced coma for a little while because he had sepsis. And when he came out of it, he told us about three spinning vortexes. Well, he told me that there were three spinning vortexes that he could go through. And he was like, there was somebody in each one of those vortexes with like going like this. And I was like, well, what did they want? And he was like, oh, I knew what they wanted. I'm like, well, were you afraid? He's like, no. I'm like, were they nice? He was like, yeah. I'm like, well, why didn't you go? He's like, because I knew what they wanted. So he was basically saying that he could choose which tunnel he wanted to go down, I guess, but none of it was scary to him. So it didn't sound like the heaven, purgatory, hell story. It was more like which direction did he want to go in? And he was like, none, because he didn't want to pass away. So that was a pretty cool story. Hyperspace later, and I wish I had the card in front of me, that I'm doing card readings, and there was a dream deck that my friend gave me, and I opened up the deck, and it was so wild because there's like these three spinning vortexes in it, and you can see this picture of this person that is, it looks like half male, half female, looks just like me and my dad. And it's like a whole light in front of them. It's very wild. Never noticed it before. I was like, whoa, what is that? Some kind of past life stuff there. So it's pretty interesting.
That's why I love this because there were, the synchronicities coming into play is fascinating. It's all part of this, the weird things that happen in our reality every day, and a lot of people don't pick up on it, but it's there.
Yeah.
And this is why I love talking about it.
Yeah. It really is. It's like, and people will say things like my mom was always very skeptical. My dad was more open, but he didn't really talk about it. But he was more into like the macabre, like I was, and like
Mhm.
scary movies and like anything to do with like, Twilight Zone stuff. And, he was into Halloween, like he had that in him. My mom was whatever. She was like, no, none of this makes sense. And I remember doing a radio show and her being like, because she would say to me, she lost her son. She lost a baby at a stillborn. She lost my brother to suicide. So she was like, and her dad was her love. And she was like, why wouldn't, if this is real, why aren't they coming to me? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, are you just missing it? Like, is the dream you're having a visit and you don't recognize it? And then I was doing a radio show and she was listening from home. And when I came home, she was like teared up and she was like, how do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do that.
It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more
Uh,
it works out. It gets
yep.
bigger, and
It's true. It's really true because I've noticed that even in my career at times where I'm not doing as much of the mediumship, like say gallery style mediumship stuff, it's like I have to really work myself back into doing just the mediumship for that period of time. So I
Mhm.
have learned that. It's absolutely, you have to kind of work out a little bit that whole week and get yourself ready for that amount of spirit activity. Like I do spirit activity every day, so they come through in readings, and that's fine. But to sit with the spirit world for a good hour or 2 hours through a gallery style event, you kind of really got to like work yourself into that. And it's the same thing with the psychic stuff too, because if you get too caught up in the material world and you're worried about money and you're worried about survival and you're worried about all these different things, we separate ourselves from that inner knowing that it's all happening for a reason. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And I tell people all the time, you think about people that are 90, 95, 100, and how many things they went through in their lives where they're like, oh my God, what if this, what if that? And some of those things actually happened, but they're still here and they made it through, you know?
I know that all too well.
Yes, you do. Yes, you
Yes.
do. Yeah, it's hard.
Would would you classify yourself or the information that you get as like clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient? I mean, do you just get a knowing? Do you actually hear things being downloaded? I mean, how do you get your information?
So all of those ways. I was doing a reading the other day, and I said to the girl, I actually her mom showed me cherry blossoms, and I said she's putting cherry blossoms in my face, like a tree with cherry blossoms. I said, and I'm smelling peppermint for some reason. So I don't know if this is something that was happening, at that time or whatever. At the same time, I heard the name Edward pop out at me. I'm like, she's also mentioning Edward, and all of those things made sense. She showed me a plate with all the cherry blossoms that her daughter had just made 3 weeks earlier that was in her kitchen.
Mm.
The flag that her dad showed me and the chair was right in her house. But I was smelling the peppermint and I heard the name Edward. Her uncle just died a few weeks ago. His name was Edward. Her mom was the only one and her aunt that called him Edward. Everybody else called him Eddie. So it was just it's everything. Like it can just be like coming at me in all the different ways. So I have all of it. I smell, I hear, I see, and I do get downloads. And I get downloads. This is another interesting thing that, when you start out, like for people, because I wrote a book on like psychic standards, I'll show it to you, on how to find or be an ethical reader. And it's basically because the ethics are so important to me. But one of the things is being able to, make sure that what was I just totally lost my train of thought on what we were just talking about.
You were talking about how you connect and
Yeah, and I was going to say something that the book took me to, and it wasn't about the about the
how you receive information. You were
yeah,
doing a
all the
reading.
receive it, and it'll come back to me. But in general, like how sometimes when you start out, that's what I was going to say. Sometimes when you start out, you're looking to other teachers to teach you. Like you're looking for people to tell you like what you're seeing means this, or what you're hearing, whatever. And we read the books, like the Conversations with God, or all the things where someone else downloaded. And then I started to realize that I was downloading. Like I was downloading a lot of information that maybe somebody else didn't get, but that doesn't make it wrong. I'm the next person getting the downloads to
Hmm.
teach the person. So I
Yeah.
think anybody that's doing this kind of work too, you want to pay attention to information that you get that's like stuff for the future. So I do, and I call those downloads. I just get like all of a sudden I'll be like, or like even with a client, like I'll get a download, and this is interesting because I don't know where this comes from, if it's coming from another energy force. It doesn't feel like it's spirit necessarily. I get downloads that I kind of, I know it's off topic a little, but it's like almost like an alien, like it's coming from some other dimension or some other life form. Let's put it that way. Some other knowing.
Do you think some of it could be coming from your higher self?
Sometimes, but sometimes I feel like it's a different energy. It feels like, because I can kind of differentiate between when my higher self, I think it, let's put it this way. I do think it's higher self, but I think there's a connection or a link to something else that feeds that information. Whether it's like the Akashic records can speak for themselves, or if someone's there with them, or whatever it is, it's like, it's yes, I feel to some degree it's my higher self, but someone's plopping it in or pushing a button to remind me. It's hard to explain it. It's not just like when I do higher self work and I'm working with inner child, or I'm going higher into, a past life for myself. It's different. It's a different energy. And
Well,
that's
that
what's all the different energies that you can feel when you're doing the work. It's wild.
the downloaded information, what I was going to tell for some people to realize if they're looking for signs, or if they're looking for to pay attention to what your thoughts are. If
Absolutely.
something pops in your head, don't just dismiss it out of hand. Think about it. If you're with someone, if you feel like the information is for them, you can give that to them. But yeah, you have to kind of train yourself to pay attention because, I have busy brain. My brain goes all over the place, and sometimes I have to sort through what I feel at times.
Mm-hmm.
But every now and then there'll be a download, and I like sit back and go, whoa,
Yeah.
was not expecting that.
And that's what happens. It's like out of nowhere. And when we still ourselves, right? Meditation's key. I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. I went to school for that around the same time I was starting my journey with everything. And that is the most important thing, if you ask me. Getting into meditative state, sitting in nature, getting close to nature. You think about animals and how like they sense things and they know things, and you see a cat staring up at the corner of the wall or something. They see things, they know things. If we were more quiet in our minds, I think more people would see and feel and know and have better judgment for themselves, right? I mean, we talk about psychic mediumship and working for others as I do for a living, but it's so important to have your own intuition and to be able to like get inside yourself and know what's best for you, because really no one knows what's best for you but you. I mean, you know better than anybody. You have all of that information ready to download at any moment. But when we're so busy in this material world, it makes it tough. So, yeah, definitely pay attention. Pay
It,
attention.
with meditation, like for someone like me, again, it's hard when I have busy brain to
Right.
quiet my mind and be able to get into a meditative state. But yes, that's the thing is when people don't realize we're conditioned from a very early age that this is what's real, this is what you believe. I remember growing up and I had things happening. I would hear my name being called. And
Right.
it sounded like my mother. I'd go in the other room. I go, "What do you want?" She goes,
Yeah.
"I didn't call you."
Yeah.
And I go, well, I heard you call me. She
Yeah.
goes, oh, you're just hearing things, or it's just your imagination. I heard
Exactly.
those, I heard those two sentences so often growing
I
up.
I'm sure you did. Because we all do, right? It's like, no, that's not really happening. I would say to my mom, I hear Aunt so and so, we call them Zizzy in Italian. I'd say, I'd hear Zizzy and whoever upstairs again. They're not upstairs. They were people that passed away. I would hear them and they would like laugh and there'd be like, I'm like, they're having a party again. That's what I used to say. They're having a party again because I would just hear all of this scattered, information coming in, and I sometimes couldn't even understand what they were saying. It was like being in a party and just hearing all the distant chatter around you. And look, I've said I wanted to write a book even about like between like the line between like being psychic and schizophrenic, like what's what. Is there such a thing as schizophrenic? Is it all spirit? What is it? But either way, if you're doing this work, you need to stay in the light. You need to stay positive. You shouldn't be doing this work when you're sick. You don't want to do this kind of work when you're feeling like, very anxious or negative thoughts or anything like that. You want to stay away from that and keep yourself in a higher space, high vibration, so that you know what you're attracting. You shouldn't have fear doing this. If you're having fear, you probably shouldn't do it. Not saying you shouldn't have fear of your ability. Some people are the best mediums because they're so concerned with getting the right information. But being afraid of what you're drawing in or being afraid of this type of work, don't do it, because you want to stay in the light and you want to make sure that the thoughts are pure. And if you have thoughts that come in that aren't, you want to get that. I always tell people, I'm all about checking yourself out with a doctor too. I've been under doctor's care forever for different things. My family suffers with anxiety. I have nothing like schizophrenia, but I've had doctors all my life, so I know that. I know it's not an issue.
Hmm.
But I always tell people, especially with kids, like, make sure you know what they're, not saying there's anything wrong because there's probably not, but it's always good to watch and not assume one way or the other, not to assume there's mental illness and not to assume that it's all psychic mediumship. There's a fine line that we don't. I mean, really, how much do we know about all of it? There's so much we just don't know about the mind, which is how.
About
Yeah,
the mind, about our reality, what comes in and out of what we think of as reality. That's why
yeah,
I'm doing this show, is to talk about what we think of as reality and what's really going on that we will turn a blind eye to. And there's
yeah,
so many people out there that poo-poo, psychics or people people getting downloads or picking up on information. They just don't want to hear it.
right,
So yeah, it's one thing I wanted to bring up. You're talking about being positive when you're getting into this work, but sometimes there is some things out there that can be less than positive.
sure.
And wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and if any experiences you might have had.
So for me, I find having a very strong boundary as you would have with anyone. You don't want spirit coming into your bed at night and waking you up because you have to work. You still have your physical body here. So if you're working with spirit, you still need to stay human, right? So if your neighbor walked into your house at midnight and was keeping you awake, you would throw them out. So I think when there are some things like that, but if you keep your vibration high, you're less likely to be attracting the lower vibration. It's kind of like we have to help people understand, we have to put it into our dimension and our world. If you are walking through a mall and you're a young woman and you're friendly and you're approachable or you're vulnerable looking, you are more likely to be a victim of someone. Same thing with the spirit world. If you're coming across strong, like, here's the work I do not come near me, and you kind of have that presence, you have a lot less chance of having to encounter. Now, not saying like, because if I do paranormal work, obviously I'm in a realm where I'm open to whatever's there, but my boundary is what keeps them from actually being able to affect my life and my energy. But when you are in a depressed state and a very anxious state, and I'm not saying on and off, we all have that. I'm saying if you're really in a dark space, that's not a good time to be opening yourself up to this kind of work. You want to get yourself cleared out, work on you psychologically, spiritually, get your vibration up, and then work with it. So yeah, we're going to encounter things. There's always going to be that. And I've had some experiences where I had a woman that passed away, and this wasn't even a negative entity or anything. It was just someone that passed away, and I felt her more than saw her. And I was doing like a group at the time, and she had drowned. And then I came home and I did a cleansing bath, and I closed my eyes and I was relaxing. And as I started to meditate, her face just jumped in front of me, and it was not a pretty sight, you know. So I was like, whoa, okay. I'm like, okay, let's not, I need to let you go, whatever, which is part of why I do the cleansing, so that if anything's still there, I can release it. But, and negative energy, I'm trying to think if I've had any kind of, I'm sure I have, but because I don't really give it energy, I'm not really thinking about it at the moment, because that's my whole thing. I just don't give it energy. So even if it happens, it's like, okay, that happened. And now I've gotten rid of you. You're gone and I'm done. But I know I've had some little things here and there, just not that much, because I have such a strong boundary about how I'm going to allow anything into my energy, you know?
I mean,
Um,
in the investigations I've done, I haven't ever come across anything so dark that I don't like the word demon or demonic.
Same. I don't even use it.
Yeah, yeah, it's more complex than that.
Sure.
But there are some entities or even human spirits who maybe a human spirit hasn't passed over. Maybe they weren't the most pleasant person in life.
Right.
And while they're sticking around after they've died, they're still not the most pleasant person. I've walked into a couple of homes where all of a sudden, if I was feeling oppressed, I was feeling my heart started pounding. It was almost felt like a
Right.
panic attack.
Right.
And it took me a minute to realize that the spirit didn't like me for some reason out of everybody else there and was trying to get me to leave.
Hmm.
The very first time it happened, I had to walk outside, gather my thoughts. When I walked back inside, it started again, but
Oh,
I kind of knew what I was up against, and I was able to pretty much mentally say, back off. I'm
yeah.
not going anywhere,
Good
and
for
continue the rest of the investigation.
That's the kind of boundary you want to have, because you are going to deal with that, especially when we do the paranormal work. And I do remember, as we're talking about this, I did an event with you at a house. And in that space, I remember, as I was feeling the spirit in the corner of a bedroom, the I think it was the one of the detectors went off. I think it was the heat and cold sensor or whatever. It
Okay.
sent that area. And
Hmm.
then as it came, I said, I feel it leaving, and it like pushed me back. And I've never had that happen before, but it like pushed me back a bit, like physically forced me back against the dresser a little bit as it left. And the meter had also dropped off at the same time. It like, so do remember that feeling like, whoa, that was like not pleasant. And I think I was getting the sensation of being pushed down the stairs. And it ended up that was one of the issues I think they were having in that house. So
Hmm.
I have had some stuff like that, but I think I don't, it's like I said, I keep myself in a higher vibration. So those things happen. In psychic work, this is one of the things that scares people about psychic work, is that we do usually have a tendency to think about the negatives. It's how life is. Our fears are strong. So we have a tendency a lot of times to remember the things that happened, that we predicted a death, or we predicted, or we dreamt this was going to happen, then we saw it and it's like, oh my God, I don't want this. Some people would even blame the psychics for it and say like, well, they said this was going to happen and then it happened. It's like, no, you're just seeing what's about to happen. So people get afraid to actually delve in because they don't want all the negativity. But I don't really even remember it, because I've learned from Janet to just kind of stay in the light. So when those things happen, they're going to happen. I've predicted things, I've seen things, and you can kind of control that too. Like I just had a client of mine who I've known for a while. She's young, and I've asked spirit to stop showing me if someone's going to pass away and I can't help them. Show me only if there's something that I can do, because I do a lot of medical mediumship. And so I had said to her, she was thinking of moving to Florida. And I said, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then I said, you know what? I do see an estate sale. I feel like you're going to be selling everything. Like she's like, how? I'm a hoarder. I have things everywhere. I said, well, I can always help you clear things out. I said, but it's like an estate sale. You're just going to have somebody come in and they're just going to come through the house. And And then I found out from her mother she passed away like a few weeks later. And she was talking to me about doing an estate sale. And I was just like, oh my God, I talked to her about this. So, and so of course you're going to remember that, like, oh no. And then, I didn't see, why didn't I see she passed? I'm like, well, because you asked not to, but I saw what was coming. And it's just a matter of not focusing on all of those things and seeing all of the things that you say, because you might get a message to not go to the left and you don't even pay attention to it. Don't go left, go right, or don't go that way, take the highway.
Hmm.
And all of those things are psychic messages that we're getting that are saving our lives or putting us on the right path. And we don't pay attention to those as much because they don't stand out the same way.
Right.
So,
Well, when people are trying to approach or find a psychic medium, is there anything that they can do to make sure they're picking the right person? Because I'm sorry to say it, there are a lot of people in this business that shouldn't be doing it.
yeah, I agree.
Either they're outright frauds or they maybe have a little bit of ability, but they're nowhere near as good as they think they are.
Right.
And I've
Yeah.
been around a few people like that. Um, what advice would you have for anybody who's seeking out a psychic medium for a reading or for any other type of work?
Well, so the first thing I always say is to get a referral. I've been all referrals for 30 years. So now I'm on Facebook a little bit, but I just have my little group of people, of my friends, and whoever refers and they want to join my Facebook page. And so I really don't promote, I don't have a website, I don't do any of that. People will say, "Where's your website?" I'm like, "I'm a hidden gem," excuse me. But with that said, you also want to find somebody that's not ego, driven. It's not about ego. And again, Janet, as my mentor, it's not about ego. We all have gifts. Everybody has gifts, whether you're an artist, a singer, you can cook well, you're the best at cleaning, you're a great animal person, whatever you have to offer the world, we all have gifts. So just because you're a psychic medium doesn't mean you're like something, so above and beyond. It's just that's your gift. So one of the things is to find somebody who's very down to earth, who's not trying to like prove themselves to you, or and also I would say, so always a referral. I think, go to somebody who says to you, "I went to this person, they were great." You should not going to say you can't leave there not feeling great, because sometimes I have to give information that you don't like, you don't want to hear it. But you shouldn't be leaving there feeling like you have a dark cloud. And if you don't buy the candle for $500, something's going to, that is not real. It's not true. We have the power of prayer. We have God within us. Like, we can push away negative energy on our own. So I think making sure that you're with somebody who someone has gone to, or you've seen like a lot of referrals and things like that from, would be the number one thing I would say.
I would also tell people go with your gut. If
Yeah,
let's say whether you're meeting someone, you're trying to uh, figure them out if they're good or not, or even if you're in the middle of a reading, and if you're not feeling good about it, if
right.
something feels off, it is.
Yeah.
That's your intuition telling you that no, this isn't good. There was a psychic medium who Sherry went to one time, and she said, "You have this negative attachment around you. I can get rid of it for $200." And it's like, no. So yeah, you use your own discernment. Listen to what your body tells you. It's what I tell people all the time. Your body gives you signals, and don't just blow it off. Whether you're getting a tingling in your scalp, which I get all the time,
Yeah.
or anything else, shortness of breath, or little anxiety or whatever that seems out of place,
Yeah.
then listen to that, look at the situation you're in, and then make a decision, because your body or your intuition, spirit, or even spirit is trying to give you a message.
Absolutely. I tell my clients all the time, I always say, take it with a grain of salt. And they're like, "Wait, you're always right." I'm not always right. It may, and again, because it blows people's minds, I say, even if I'm 70% right, I'm still not always right. I'm 30% not right. You know what I mean? You're not going to be 100%. and we get things in signs and symbols. So sometimes I'm seeing a sign and it might be Florida to me, or maybe it has to, like, say I see a dolphin. Let's just, for me, a dolphin might mean breath work, breathing, or it could mean Florida. It could mean a lot of somebody collected them and I have to like mind map it, as I call it, and go further with it. But what if I'm getting it wrong? And so I missed something, trust your instincts, because maybe it's that there's somebody in Florida that's going to invite, send you an invite, or maybe there's something with your breathing. But also, if it's scary, I tell people too, like, listen, take it in, hear what I'm saying, keep it in the back of your head. Don't dwell on it. Because again, I'm a certified hypnotherapist, so I know what the brain can do. I also don't want to give people information that's going to create a problem. So take it in, take it with a grain of salt, or write it down and leave it there. And pay attention to you and how you're feeling. And if something comes up that feels like it makes sense to what I was saying, then you know that that's something that's accurate for you to, heed the advice. But I always tell people, trust your instincts over mine. I do this for a living, and yet still, I say the same thing with doctors. Advocate for yourself. You can go to a doctor, and this person has all this schooling to tell him what's wrong or her what's wrong, but they might be wrong. I've saved many a life saying, I'm sorry, but I don't feel that. And I think you need to still address this. No, they said, no, I'm telling you. Well, I had all the cardiac exams. I'm telling you, like, I'm not trying to scare you, but this is what I feel. And I tell them, and if you're still feeling that, then heed my advice and trust your body. Like you said, when something feels right or feels wrong to you. So regardless of what a psychic says, regardless of anything, we're not God either. So
It's trusting your own intuition because
always.
everybody has it, whether they want to admit it or not.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And I
with,
go ahead.
no, after you. Go ahead.
Also think that's why we don't read ourselves, right? Because we could very easily not be listening to our instincts and getting caught up in fears or what we hope to be true. So when we're pulling cards for ourselves, not saying we don't do it, but we have to be very careful of what we're seeing. Like really look at that and say, is this something I want to see, or is this something I'm so afraid of that I'm seeing that in the cards? Because when I do readings, even if I do a phone reading, a lot of times I'll send pictures of the cards to people. And I'm looking at a card yesterday, and this girl's like, oh, this card looks like this, that, and the other. I'm like, oh, I'm not getting that at all. But because she was afraid of that, she picked something out in the picture to her that was scary. So then you have to ask, do you do this work often? Do you meditate? Are you are you very in tune with your intuition? Or are you basing this on your fears? So it's a complicated, complex world, that we work in.
Absolutely. I wanted to throw a scenario at you and get
Sure.
your thoughts on it for anybody else who might be in this situation. And again, getting back more to paranormal experiences. The very first house I lived in when I moved here to New Jersey 26 years ago, time flies.
Yeah.
And it was an old 1930s converted cabin in a lake community.
Okay.
And when I moved in, I started having experiences. I would hear my name being called. I had a video camera. And this is what got me into the paranormal research is I would film things that should not have been there.
Okay.
But then the one thing that happened several times was I would get sleep paralysis.
Ugh.
I've never had sleep paralysis in my life. And since then, I've only ever had sleep paralysis in that house. Never again.
Interesting.
And so I would, with people who have it, I mean, my experience was I would wake up, I was conscious, I
Uh-huh.
couldn't move. I couldn't move. And then it would feel like there was this energy floating like above my chest, around me,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, but for me, I never get scared with these things.
Okay.
Um, so I was trying to think in my head, what do you want? And then the energy would get more intense to the point where I say, okay, no, you're done. Go away. Go
Right.
away. I'd throw up my own light of protection or whatnot. It would go
Right.
away. And the last time I had one, I was lying in bed and I woke up and I was paralyzed again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept hearing a man's voice whispering in my right ear,
Okay.
whispering desperately. I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Okay.
And so in my head, again, I'm not afraid. I was trying to tell whoever this was, look, you need to slow down. I can't understand you. But every time I said that, he seemed to get more and more agitated. Till finally, the last time I felt, I never saw it, but it felt like he was in front of this far in front of my face, screaming at
Right.
the top of his lungs. And that's when, again, I said, okay, that's it, you're done. And I imagined pushing him out the window behind me, and he went away. And
Which,
I,
go ahead.
no, I mean, I just came out of it. But again, it never frightens me.
Well, which just goes to show with the imagining you pushed him out the window, right? I always say that your imagination is real. So when we talk about hypnosis, doing past life regressions, and I say to people, if you're imagining it, it's real. So I think I'm just imagining. Just tell me what you see, because that is your subconscious. You're going in there and so you're feeling like you're imagining it, but what you were really doing is your energy was pushing that energy out. So with sleep paralysis, I am not a fan, and I've had it on and off throughout my life.
Mhm.
And there are different um, feelings that I've gotten from this. One of them is what sounds like was happening to you is spirit gets way too close to our energy. We need to keep a boundary from them. And we're vulnerable when we're sleeping. So they come in so close that they actually affect our energy field. So what happens is it almost kind of creates a vortex of energy. It pulls our energy out. So when mediums try to, like mediums that go in the cabinet, and which people will try to manifest like the plasma, whatever you call it, the mist, or try to manifest a rose to fall or whatever, you would have to allow in that circle for energy to come from your body to manifest that energy, because the spirit cannot do that alone. They need to pull energy from, whether it's your lights. That's why sometimes lights will go out and things. It's not like they're always trying to create a problem for you. They're just pulling the energy from what's going on around them, whether it's you or the circuits, the energy around. So with that said, it sounds to me like someone was desperate for you to, like, help them. And so they were just kind of like pulling on your energy. They may have even wanted to manifest physically for some reason, to get back onto the earth plane, or to do something. They needed more energy to physically get something done. So I think that sounds like someone really trying to get your attention. One of the other things that could happen, which could also be, is the walk-ins, as they call it, which, whether you believe in that or not, but pulling your soul out to get their soul in. So, and then I don't know a whole lot about that because I don't work with that so much, but like they say that like they can walk in and then your soul gets kind of left here. So was that someone's walk in, that someone walked into their body and their soul got pulled out? So they're trying to get back into another body to get back into the work. It's a complicated thing, but that's another theory.
Yeah,
Now
with
when
walk-ins, I'm sorry to interrupt you. With walk-ins, I've heard different theories on it. One is that the soul, your soul, for
yeah,
whatever reason, is just done and
right.
doesn't want to continue. So another soul on the other side agrees to take over for you and
Okay.
literally walks in, you walk out, and they take over your life.
Right.
And people have noticed that some people's personalities have changed,
Sure. Yep.
usually for the better.
Yep.
And they just notice the differences, but that walk-in just continues to live that other person's life while the soul goes back to source.
Right.
That's one version of it anyway.
Mhm. It is. Yeah. And
And then there's possession, which is a different story.
right. And I was going to say, and then the other version is you didn't necessarily agree to it. They've decided to come in and say, I'm going to take over now, which to me is still like, I see them both as walk ins, even if we don't call it that way, because they're, again, how we get downloads. One person gets it this way, someone else gets it another way. But to me, they're both like on that same string of how that is happening. And that's one of the things that can happen for me when I have, not every time, but there were a lot of times when I would have sleep paralysis And so doctors didn't understand it. When I was a kid, I'd explain it and they'd say it's sleep paralysis. And then I'd say, but like, what is all the humming that I hear? And they're like, we've never heard of that. So I've said this a million times because there's always this very loud, high humming. And to this day, as much as I love crystal singing bowls, there are vibrations that I'm like, I can't, I don't like the way it feels. It almost feels like it's going to take me literally away. I can't explain it. And then I had an alien, not an alien encounter, but a UFO encounter when I was in the 80s with my dad and my sister. We literally saw this big thing hanging overhead and it had that same humming sound. So I was up at it was my husband, I think he was my boyfriend at the time, up on Greenwood Lake. And in the middle of the night, this was in the 90s now, there was this huge light shining in the window and this loud humming. And he was like, what the heck is that? And I was sleeping and I didn't remember saying it until the morning. And I said, oh, it's just, it's the UFOs. They're coming to get water. They'll be gone in a minute or whatever I said. And I went and I slept through it. And the next morning he's like, what were you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking? And then I remembered and I'm like, oh my God. And it just came to me like it was so natural. Like, oh, it's just because it was that same humming.
Mm-hmm.
So then I wonder with some of my sleep paralysis, is it again, how many dimensions are there? How many things are we dealing with? How many energies? There isn't necessarily one type of walk-in. There isn't one reason for sleep paralysis. There isn't one way of getting information. We just don't know everything.
There's another form. Sleep paralysis can be a part of this, is when some people are ready to have an out-of-body experience.
Right.
The body is shut down, the mind is still awake,
Right.
and the buzzing. A lot of people do report hearing a buzzing. Whitley Strieber was talking about some of his experiences and would hear this buzzing sound just before he was able to leave his body
Right.
and have those types of experiences. So maybe the buzzing, again, everything is energy, is
Right.
vibration.
Yeah.
Everything's vibration. So
Yes.
maybe that's has something to do with it.
I have had out of body experiences, which I also don't like. People like buy stones and things to astral project. I'm like, I like to stay where I am. Thank you. But I have had, and I have to think back if I believe I've always had the humming, no matter what, even if I didn't leave my body, if I just had the same experiences like you've had where you feel the pressure and you can't, and I'll actually feel like I can't breathe. Like I feel like I'm suffocating at times, which is the only time the fear comes in. And then I just remind myself what's happening so I can walk myself back out of it. But yeah, I feel like I've always had the humming no matter what, even if I'm not leaving the body and I'm totally aware of what's happening and something is just oppressive. So I'm not sure. I've always had the humming no matter what the experience was. So
Uh, Going back to when you talked about your hypnotherapy, how
mhm.
did you get in for training for hypnotherapy and specifically doing past life regressions?
It was another, synchronicities. I was working with Janet. It was just her, I, and a handful of people that were working at the church. And I had offered to help paint our offices while my kids were in school because they were little. And so it was just her and I, and we were painting and we were talking. And I had this interest in hypnosis. I was reading a lot of books and reading like Many Masters, Many Lives, or whatever it was, Many Lives, Many Masters, and I was very interested. And she had just brought up that she was going to this woman in Ringwood for these classes. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy because I've been thinking about doing this. So, long story longer, I decided to get in touch with her and I took classes with her as well. And that was one of the things I really wanted to do. So initially, when you get certified, you're doing more of the clinical work. So you're working more with anxiety and smoking and, weight loss and stress and whatever. And then I took the advanced classes with her to do more of the spiritual work, soul retrieval and past life regression and cord cuttings and things like that. So that's how I
Right.
got started.
Uh, Without, of course, mentioning anybody, was there someone that you took through a past life regression that you remember the most?
One that is really, really cool was a young man that was probably a teenager, and I was friends with his mom. And he kept having like night terrors all through his life. He was having night terrors and fear of dying young. So he had this like anxiety that was getting overwhelming for him. And I said, why don't we do a past life regression? Let's see what's going on here. You know, he's had this since he was a little boy, and it was a certain age, right? So, like, when you come into this life and you like feel like at this point in time this might happen, sometimes it's because that happened in another lifetime. You have cell memory, or you have, energetic memories that are happening, and you think it's going to happen again. So, I did this whole regression with him, and he came up with all of this stuff about an airplane, and I think we had the flight number. Like, there was like between the two of us, because when I do past life regressions, sometimes I'm also getting information for this person on that life or a different one. And so we walked him through, and I took him into the light to look down on his life. What did you learn in that lifetime that you needed to take into this life so you can release that experience? And so he came out of it, he came to, and he went home and he researched. And apparently there was a plane crash that he, in that time frame in New York, where we came up with all this information. And that was it. I think he had one more episode of like fear of dying, and that was it. And now he's in his 20s, maybe 30, and never again had another issue. So
I honestly feel that's where a lot of phobias come from. Either, well, I mean, you can have trauma when you're young and then have phobias later, but some of it will also can be attributed to a past life experience too that's bleeding over. Maybe that's something that that person has to work out now in this lifetime
right.
because
Yeah,
of whatever trauma that was.
absolutely. And sometimes with a past life regression, right? I mean, we're working with the mind again, we're working with energies. Maybe you are going to your childhood. Maybe there's something you saw. Maybe you read about this. Maybe you saw it on the news, and you're having that memory still. And so we're doing a past life regression, and maybe it's a this life regression that you just didn't go into a past life. You saw these things happening, but it could still be just what was in your cell memory. You could have been watching this at 1 year old, or maybe your grandfather experienced something and it's in your cells. Again, I'm very open to, I call it past life regression, but is it this life regression? Is it cell memory? Because there's so many things that are happening, kind of like all the different dimensions happening at once, that I don't like to just like, well, it's this, so it's that, like maybe it's not past life, but still the past life regression is what brings you to that healing. So to me, that's all that really matters. I don't care how we get there as long as we get to the healing. So
Exactly. Exactly. Well, we're coming up towards the end of the program here. Now, you are on Facebook
I,
and people, you work with referrals there, so no website, but your book, is it still available that people can purchase?
it is. It's available on Amazon, and I believe it's Amazon.com and BarnesandNobles.com. And and what it is it's actually a workbook. So it's actually done in a way that it talks a little bit about me, and then there's questions and answers, like all the questions that people have asked me in my life about this work. I answer them. So I put the question, I answer to my best ability, and then there's pages that you can write your own experiences and things on, so that you can work with your own, because it's finding or being an ethical reader. So
Mhm. Fantastic. Well, Patty, thank you so much for coming on. Really excited to have you on here. And, we got to talk about doing some of these investigations here soon.
absolutely.
Well, I'm doing something at a theater up in Sussex Friday that I hear is haunted, so I'll have to talk
Ooh,
to the owner and see maybe if it's something we can get into.
very fun. Can I tell you one quick story before we end, or you want to?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So one more story. When my dad was passing, he was passing away and he couldn't speak, and he was on hospice on the medications, and he wasn't speaking anymore. And out of nowhere, I said, Dad just told me he's going to show me a metal anchor to let us know that he's okay. My whole family was around. So the next morning, he passed in the evening, in the middle of the night. And the next morning, we're going through pictures and things. And my niece was here. And I said, Can you grab me that black folder over there? That's Grandpa's artwork. I want to put it out for the memorial service. Well, she grabs the wrong one, and out falls a metal anchor. And my mother was sitting in the chair, like stunned because she doesn't believe any of this. This is what fell out of the book that she picked up. Not only is it a metal anchor, but it's a medal from my nephew in the service that my
Wow.
father had pictures of him and the medal with the anchor in the book. So literally within 12 hours of him passing, and my whole family knew because I told them straight out what was going to happen. So that was like one of the best pieces of evidence ever. So
Fantastic.
pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I love when things like that happen.
Yeah, it was wild.
Okay, well, we will be going, but we'll talk with you soon.
Oh,
I'll probably have to have you back again in the near future.
sure, sounds great. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay. Well, that was Patti Lehman, Lehman. And like I said before, Patty's a really good friend of mine. You can tell in the way we're talking. Um, I wanted to clarify something. The way I was talking in this show with her, I do not consider myself a psychic medium. I realize I was talking like one with her. I have had many experiences in my life. I've been kind of training on some things. I do read cards and whatnot, but it is not a full-time thing for me yet. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Patty's been doing it, like she said, for 30 years. So I just wanted to say that. And next time, we're going to have some great guests. So please keep tuning in. You listen to the audio version on the Paranormal UK network, paukradio.com. Goes out on Apple, Spreaker, Podbean, Samsung, Google, every major platform, even Amazon Audible. And of course, this video is on my YouTube channel, Melissa Lee. So thank you for all tuning in, and we will catch you next time. In the meanwhile, be good humans. We'll talk to you soon.